The fabric we're going to use to cut out our flares. It's an Ankara fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do will be to calculate how much fabric I'm going to need. Now, I already have my fully flared arc here, which is 4 inches. Now, I've already told you that the length of my fully flared skirt is going to be 17 inches, and it's a slightly mini skirt. So I'm going to add 17 to 4 inches. That will give me 21 inches. Now, because I told you we're going to have to fold our fabric lengthwise and then widthwise, or you can fold it widthwise and then lengthwise, whichever way it works both ways. So I need to get a square because I need to get out the measurements equally on both sides. So that means that I need 42 inches by 42 inches for me to cut this out. So for me to do that, I'll first of all check the width of my fabric. Because this is Ankara, the width is most times not more than 43, 45 or thereabouts. That's why for Ankara you may not be able to get a long fully flared skirt. And if you must get a long fully flared skirt, you'll have to join it at the sides. And that will be so bulky, I'm sure you wouldn't like it. All right, so let me check this. This is my width. This is the width of the fabric. You can see this is the selve edge and this is the selve edge. So I'll just check that to be sure. What I have here is 45 inches, so that's enough for what I need. So all I need to do now is just to measure out my 42 inches. I'll just add a little extra just for, you know, exigencies, or just to be sure that you don't have a problem. Because at times the way fabric is woven, it could be woven in a very funny way. So you're not sure whether you would have the same measurements both sides. So you need to measure. I'll just add 2 inches. That will give me 44 inches. So I have 44 inches here. So all I need to do right now is just to fold it at both sides and cut it out. So once I fold this side here, I pin it. I fold the other side and measure. I measure out 44 inches on the other side. Okay. Now once I've gotten that, all I just need to do is just to pin it on the other side and cut it out. I cut that line out. Okay, so this is the material we're going to use. I'll just fold the others and put it aside so that we can cut out . So this is the fabric we're using to cut it out. So all I just need to do is fold it lengthwise and widthwise. Make sure it's equal on both sides. So once I've done this, I'll just smoothen it out. You can use your iron, your pressing iron, to just smoothen the fabric out if it's very rough. So I think I could just use my palm. It should be fine. Good. So once I've done this, you can see that I folded it on the wrong side. So I'll take my fully flared arc and pin it to this corner here. You can see that. So now all I just need to do is just begin to measure my 17 inches. Let me see what I have here. I actually have up to 18. Let me see whether I could just, fine. So I could even add an extra inch to the length. So let me make it into 18 rather than using my 17 that I had planned to use. That will make it slightly longer. That's okay. So all I just need to do now, since my new length is 18 inches, I just begin to mark out 18 from the edge. Now what I could also do is add my 4 inches to my 18, which will give me 22. And all I just need to do is measure it all the way from the top like that. That means I have already added my radius length and the length of my skirt together. It's the same way. You can decide to mark out 18 from here or decide to mark out 22 from the tip. Whichever one it's easier for you, you can do. I'll just mark out 18 from the edge of my arc. Okay, sorry, I think I marked out 17 there. This is 18. You can see I'm getting out the marked points. So what I just do is just begin to connect those points. So you can see what I have done. I have curved it out. Now there's what we call the correction point on the edge, the middle part of our flare. Now if you look at this, the middle point of our flare, which is directly from the center, just middle all the way to this point here. This represents the cross grain of your fabric, and it's very natural for it to drop at points that are, because this is the elasticated portion of your fabric. Remember our crossway strip, how we cut it? We cut it at that diagonal portion. So this is the point that drops and has elasticated. So we need to reduce the length here, because if it's a very soft fabric like chiffon or organza, for instance, you will find out that once you're wearing it, you will find it droop down at those points. And we don't want our flared skirt looking like that. So we need to reduce that. So because it's Ankara and it's cotton, so we don't need to take too much. If the fabric is soft, the softer the fabric, the more the measurements we're going to measure at that point. So all I just need to do is use like 3/4 of an inch, because number one, the length is short. At the same time, the fabric is not that soft. So once I get the midpoint here, I just measured out 3/4 inches here. And I will just mark out like about 6 or 7 inches from this point here, and at the same here. And I just curve that. This is 6 inches. Now if it's wider, if the fabric is bigger, you know, maybe when we're making a semi-flared skirt, we'll see that. We may need to take more than 6 inches. We may need to take like maybe about 8 inches. So what I'm going to do now is just take it from there and just correct that part there. You can see as I just try to blend it back into my 6 inches. Now, because I know that at this point here, it's easier for it to droop down than at this other point, because this is on the straight grain, it would not be elasticated. This is also on the straight grain, it won't be elasticated. But the middle here would be elasticated. So once I've done that and I've corrected it, I just pin all the layers together and I cut out. So since I've already cut this out, I cut out the edge first before I cut out my arc. Now, this is a full circle. So, and I don't have any joining. So because I want to put in a zip there, I'll just slit open one of the sides. Okay, whichever side we decide. Okay, let's use this. We already have our flare. It looks so nice. You can see how flared it looks like. I can't wait to see it on the mannequin yet. Now, but the next thing we're going to do now, before we get down to cutting our quarter flared and our semi flared, we need to cut out the lining that we're going to use. Now, because this is the one we're working on, we're going to cut out the lining. And the lining will be 3 inches shorter than the actual length. So I'll fold it back. Okay, now I've folded it back. I'll now take my lining. I have a lining here that I'm going to use. So I'll just take this. I'll take it and fold it into 4. Let me see if I have enough length there. This is a little less, but since we're still going to subtract, it doesn't really matter. So we'll just take that and fold it into 4. Now I've folded it into 4 now. So I'll now take my flare and place it on it. I'm still going to reduce the length, so it's okay. Because at times if you don't have enough lining, you're just wondering, oh, can I still get what I need to get out of here? You can. Good. So you can see that this is already less by like around 3 inches as I want to subtract from it. So I'll pin it in place. So I'll cut out the waist. So I'll remove the pins. Now, you can see, like I told you, we already have less than what we need. So, because this could happen and you don't have enough lining to take care of this, what will you do? So all I just need to do is subtract 3 inches from the rest. Mark it there. I'm not going to, because I don't want it to smear all over my lining, so I'll just give it as points. So since I've done that, I'll just connect it like that. Good. So I pin it. So I'll just cut it along those points I just made. So now we've taken care of our lining. So what I need to do is just open out one side, just like we did for the skirt. So I already have my lining here. So this is my lining. You can see how it flares too. So let's put that away. Let's just notch the middle. Let's do that also for our skirt, because you need to know the center. Let's pin that away. Now it's very important to note that this fully flared that we have cut out already has incorporated our zip allowance. And I'm sure you're wondering how that is. Now remember that whenever we're making anything around the curve, we need to subtract seam allowance. Remember that for the necklines. It's just the same way. What we've done is that we just left it without subtracting the seam allowance. And now we have, because we have left that, we're going to be having an extra 2 inches or about maybe 3 inches to make our zip width. Now that's intentional. But if, for instance, you just want to attach, your fully flared, piece to the break of your skirt, and you don't really need to have an opening like we have just done here. All you need to do is subtract 2 inches from your circumference. That means you subtract 2 inches from maybe your break measurement, or your waist, or maybe your sleeve edge, or your blouse, wherever you want to put your fully flared without having an opening, we need to subtract 2 inches. That means if your break, for instance, is 34 inches, I'm not going to make my fully flared radius with 34 inches. I won't. I would subtract 2 inches from it first, and that will give me 32. Now with 32, I would now calculate my radius and work with it. Now what you will notice would be, by the time you're done with that, you would get a slightly smaller circumference than what your actual break is. But by the time you notch it round and you pin it, you'll see it will just fit snugly. That's how it's meant to be. So let's get to the floor and see how we're going to cut out our semi-flared and our quarter-flared skirt. Now I have this fabric I've already cut. What I did was that I took my semi-flared arc, that is 8 inches. I added it to the 31 inches I needed for the length of my skirt, and that will give me 39 inches. Now, of course, because I have to double this, I have to add extra and multiply it by 2. That means that I added 1 inch. That gave me 40. Now multiplied it by 2, that will give me 80. So that's what I have here. And all I just needed to do was just fold it into 2, exactly as I told you we would do. So I'll now take my semi-flared arc and place it at the edge here, and then pin it to that point. Now you can see that we've already pinned it there. So all I just need to do would begin to measure out the length. My length is 31 inches, so that's all I'm going to begin to measure. 31 inches. I mark it at distances like that. If you're not sure about the distances you're leaving, it's better to make the distances quite close so that you won't have too much gap to cover. This is my 31. So let me just connect these ones as they're here. It's easier to connect as you're seeing them. So let me do the rest here. So I'll now connect the other points that I have here. Now we're going to do the correction to the center. This will give me my center here. You can look at that point. This should be my center. I'm going to measure in 1 inch. The other one we did was 3/4 because of the length. So I'll now mark out like 8 inches here and 8 inches over here. And all I just need to do is, take it through that point that I have already made from that 8 inches there. Let's take it through that point there, like that. And I just smoothen it to the end also, just like the way I started. Now this will take some practice, so don't be annoyed if it doesn't come out the way you expect. Just smoothen it so that you have a smooth line starting from here, going through here, like that. So once I've done that, I'll just pin it in place so that it doesn't shift. I'll now take my scissors and I'll cut it out. I'll cut slightly above the red marker so that I don't have the stain on my fabric. Just slightly above it. Okay, so once I've cut that, I just need to cut out the waist. So we're done with this. Don't forget that if you choose to make your semi-flared skirt, because you can choose any of them to make, always make sure that you notch the center. So this is how our semi-flared skirt looks like. Let me unpin it at the base. I'm going to show you on the mannequin how each drops so that you'll understand the different kinds of flare and how they flare out and which appeal they each have. can see that this is not as flared as the fully flared skirt that we just made, that we just cut before now. You can see that it's nice, but it's not as flared as it is. So now let's pick our quarter flared pattern, our arc. Let's put this aside. This is another fabric that we're going to use to cut out our quarter flare skirt. Now what I did was, the length of my quarter flare is 25 inches and this is 16 inches. I just added them together, I got 41. I added an extra inch just to be sure and I had 42 inches, and that's all I had to do. All I had to do was cut out a square that's 42 by 42 inches. Let's do this on the wrong side this time around. So I just place it on the floor like I did the other one. Don't forget that I'm not folding it. I'm just going to leave it as it is because it just has to be single ply. And I'll take my quarter flared arc here. I pin it down. So once I've pinned that down, I now begin to measure out the length that I need. Don't forget that my length is 25 inches. So all I need to do is mark out 25. So since I've gotten here, let me connect these points. Let me come to this side. Okay, you can see that is exactly the length that I have here. So I measure out my 25 inches. So I get the center as usual, which is somewhere here. I mark up around 1 inch. And I still leave my 8 inches here. So I curve this to meet the edge I have left here. And I do the same here. Can you see that? So we'll now cut it out. Let me go from this side. Don't forget to cut slightly above the red line so that your fabric is not stained. Come this side and finish it up. Now we have cut this side out, so all we need to do is cut out the waist. Now we're done. You can see this is our A-line skirt or quarter flared skirt. You can see it's just slightly flared. You can see that. You can see the slight flare that we have there is not as much as the semi-flared. So let's check each of these out on the mannequin, how it looks like. So I'm sure you can see how our fully flared skirt looks like. See how it falls. You can see the flare lines, how it looks like. It flares really well. This is how the fully flared looks. It's really, really nice and fully flared. Let's see how the semi-flared skirt looks like. So this is our semi-flared skirt. You can see it's not as flared as our fully flared skirt, but it just nicely falls and nicely drapes down. You can see it looks really nice, but it's not as flared as our fully flared skirt. Let's see how our quarter flared skirt looks like. Now take a look at our A-line skirt. Well, that's the reason why they call it A-line. It's our quarter flared skirt, but it just looks like a, letter A, like a normal skirt, and just flares out gently at the edge of the hemline. That's why it's called the A-line skirt. You can see that we don't really see any flare at all. It just looks like a normal plain skirt, but that just flares out gently by the sides. That's how our A-line or quarter flared skirt looks like. So the next thing we're going to do now is go and sew our fully flared skirt. Let's go and sew.